I used to think silence was peaceful. But lately, it feels like a punishment. The kind that lingers even when the house is full of things that should make noise. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own footsteps. My husband's been gone for weeks again. Business, he says. He always says that. I used to believe it mattered, the work, the trips, the meetings. But somewhere between the phone calls and missed dinners, I stopped waiting for him to come home. When he's gone, the house turns cold. I try to fill the emptiness with chores, recipes I'll never finish, shows I don't really like. The kind of distractions you use when you're trying not to think about the life you thought you'd have. I tell myself it's just temporary. That love changes, matures, quiets down. But the truth is, it's not quiet, it's gone. Then, a few weeks ago, he called to tell me his son, my stepson, was moving back in for a while. I hadn't seen him properly in years. The boy I remembered had grown into a man, taller, broader, carrying a kind of sadness in his eyes I couldn't name. He smiled when he saw me, polite, maybe a little unsure. I tried to act normal, though something about his presence made me strangely aware of the silence again. Because for the first time in a long while, it wasn't empty. He'd just ended a relationship, or something close to it. I didn't ask for details, but I could sense the weight he was carrying. The way he sat at dinner, eyes lowered, eating without tasting. The way he avoided the living room, staying in his room late into the night. I knew that look. It's the look of someone who's lost something they thought would last. The first few days were awkward, small talk over coffee, him thanking me for meals I barely cooked right. But as days turned into a week, something shifted. He started helping me in small ways, fixing a cabinet door, changing a light bulb, bringing in groceries without being asked. And I noticed things I shouldn't have. The quiet confidence, the gentleness in his voice, how he always said thank you like he meant it. One evening, we talked longer than usual. Nothing serious, just stories about his childhood, how his father used to forget birthdays but always showed up with gifts afterward. I laughed. It felt wrong to laugh, but it also felt nice, comfortable, like something I'd been missing. After he went upstairs, I stood there, staring at the half-empty glasses on the table, the soft hum of the dishwasher behind me. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just being kind, just offering him comfort, a motherly warmth he'd lost long ago. But as I turned off the kitchen light that night, something inside me whispered otherwise. That kindness wasn't pure anymore. It had started to mean something else. Something I shouldn't have let myself feel. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I found him sitting in the living room, the lights low, the TV playing some muted late-night show he wasn't really watching. He looked tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much pain. I hesitated for a moment before walking in. I asked if he couldn't sleep, and he shook his head, eyes still on the screen. I poured him a cup of tea, the way I used to for his father, and placed it beside him. He smiled faintly, that polite kind of smile you give when you don't want someone to worry. The next night, it rained. The kind of rain that taps against the windows like it's trying to come inside. My husband called earlier, said he'd be staying longer, didn't know when he'd be back. I told him it was fine, that we were managing. He didn't ask how we were doing. And I didn't offer anything more. I tried to distract myself, folding laundry, scrolling my phone, pretending the storm outside wasn't stirring the storm inside me. But when I passed by his room, I noticed the door slightly open, light spilling into the hallway. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stopped. I knocked lightly and asked if he needed anything. He looked up from his desk, headphones around his neck, eyes tired again. He told me he couldn't focus on anything, that every memory felt louder at night. I understood too well. He motioned for me to sit, so I did. We talked again, softer this time, like the dark demanded secrets instead of small talk. He asked me if I'd ever felt forgotten. I swallowed before answering. I told him yes, every day lately. That honesty wasn't planned. It just slipped through the cracks I'd been trying to seal. He looked at me with something like guilt, as if he wasn't supposed to know I could hurt. He stood, pacing the room, running a hand through his hair, frustrated with everything he couldn't fix. I told him heartbreak makes people feel unworthy, but it doesn't last forever. He stopped right in front of me then, close enough for me to hear the unevenness of his breathing. You deserve better, he said quietly, and for the first time, someone saw the truth I'd been hiding. I told him not to say that. Not because it wasn't true, but because hearing it made it real. He shook his head, eyes locked onto mine, and suddenly the space between us wasn't enough. He reached out, slowly, like giving me time to pull away. His fingers brushed my cheek, gentle but certain. I should have stepped back. I should have remembered every reason this was wrong. But all I could feel was how long I'd gone without being touched like that, like I mattered. I whispered his name, a warning wrapped in a plea. He hesitated for only a heartbeat before his lips met mine. The kiss wasn't reckless or rushed. It was soft, aching, full of all the things we'd been pretending not to feel. My hands found his shoulders without permission, holding on to someone I had no right to need. The storm outside grew louder, and so did the one inside me. Every second tangled us deeper into something we couldn't undo. When it finally ended, we didn't speak. We just stood there, breathing the same guilty air, knowing we'd crossed a line we could never step back over. When I finally walked out of his room, I couldn't even look at him. My hands were still shaking. My heart was pounding too fast. And under all the guilt and fear was a terrible truth. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I told myself it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. But deep down, I already knew. That night changed everything. Morning light has a way of making everything look worse. It poured through the curtains that day, too bright, too honest. I woke up before anyone else, sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee I never drank. Every sound felt louder, the hum of the fridge, the dripping faucet, the beating of my own heart. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything, that what happened last night was just weakness meeting weakness. But lies sound different when you say them in daylight. When he walked in, he looked as lost as I felt. Neither of us said a word. He poured himself some water, his hands trembling slightly. I wanted to say something, to make it normal again, but every word that came to mind felt wrong. The silence between us wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. It knew too much. He finally spoke first. He said he'd been thinking, that maybe it was time to move out again. Said it gently, almost apologetically, as if leaving was the only decent thing left for either of us to do. I nodded, pretending it was for the best, pretending it didn't sting. I told him I understood, that space might help him figure things out. But inside, I was unraveling. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. He packed quietly, avoiding eye contact. I folded laundry just to keep my hands busy, pretending not to notice every time he walked past. When his suitcase was by the door, he paused, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something more, then didn't. I almost stopped him. Almost told him I was sorry, that I didn't regret how it felt, only that it happened. But I didn't. Because saying it out loud would make it real all over again. When the door closed behind him, the house fell silent again, the same silence I used to hate, but now it felt different. It wasn't empty this time, it was full of what I'd done. Every corner of the house seemed to remember it, even if no one ever would. 2 days later, my husband came home. He kissed me on the cheek like always, asked about the groceries, the bills, if everything had been fine. I nodded, smiled, said it was. He didn't notice the hesitation, didn't ask why my eyes didn't meet his. I realized then how easy it was to lie when the person you're lying to has stopped looking closely. That night, he fell asleep beside me, his breathing steady, peaceful. I lay awake, staring into the dark, the weight of my secret pressing down so hard I could barely breathe. I thought of the look in my stepson's eyes before he left. Not desire, not guilt, but something like loss. Maybe he'd realized before I did that what we wanted wasn't love, just two broken hearts trying to find warmth in the same mistake. I told myself I helped him heal, that I was only being kind. But maybe all I really did was hand him a new kind of hurt, one he'll never talk about, and one I'll never stop remembering. I used to think silence was a punishment. Now I know it's a mirror. Because every time the house goes quiet, I hear that night all over again. Soft, forbidden, and irreversible. And I finally understand why some mistakes don't fade. They just learn how to stay quiet.